In this video, we're just going to provide a quick tour of the user interface to get you comfortable and provide a very basic understanding and terminology of what you're looking at. So the black area that you see here is really your drawing area, and you can see that I can pan and zoom and look at the drawing in different modes, and we'll talk about the view commands here in a little bit. But over to the left is where you'll find those view commands. So you can pan and zoom and orbit. Um, you can look at entity properties. So I could, click on this and select an object, and over to the properties panel is going to show me what those objects are. You've got some measure tools, and we'll cover those in detail in following videos. This little icon you see in the lower left is known as a coordinate system, or a sometimes a gizmo they call it. But basically, it just tells you which direction north is. So this drawing's been oriented or twisted at a slightly 45-degree angle, so that it's the roads are horizontal and perpendicular to our view. So north is actually in the direction of that y direction or y coordinate, and then your x direction, which would be your east, is pointing down slightly at a 45-degree angle. But gives you an orientation to where north resides within your project if your project is on a coordinate system like a state plane system, um, or other geodetic coordinate system. As we move down along the bottom, there's a status bar. And if you're familiar with AutoCAD, AutoCAD has what's known as a model space and a paper space. So your model space is where objects are drawn at a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning that 1 foot is 1 foot or 1 meter is 1 meter. When you go to a paper space is basically, this is my size of my paper, 24 by 36. And within that paper space, I have this viewport that lets me scale the drawing. So when I plot it, that it's at a certain scale, like 1 to 40 feet or 1 to 50 feet. So basically 1 inch equals 50 feet. And that way you can properly scale objects if you print this off on a plotter or printer. But primarily you can work and you're going to work inside a model space. As we move over, there is this panels button, and that panels button turns on three panels: the properties, references, and layers. You can see that over here to my upper right, those are the panels. So I have my layer panel that's already turned on, and my property panels. Now if I come over here, I can toggle those off or toggle those on. Next to that is the eSnap settings. So you'll see these options when we get into actually drawing or measuring. We can snap to certain locations within the object. So we can snap to an endpoint of a line, a midpoint of a line, the center of a circle or arc, the tangent, perpendicular, a lot of different settings of snapping to objects. And you'll see some other options that we can select by right clicking too. Next to that, you've got your shade view, and that basically is if you had a 3D object, you can either look at it in a 3D wireframe, hidden view, a flat with edges, 2D view, and so on. These other toggles here is to turn on the grid. So because we're zoomed out, we don't have our grid turned on, but it basically gives you a grid of your view. It kind of helps you orient and determine, sizes and uh, basically what a 2 foot grid would be or a 50-foot grid would be. You can turn that on and off. You can turn on the polar snap. And again, these objects you'll see when we get into actually drawing. The E-snap, you're either going to toggle your snaps on and off. The same thing with tracking, and we'll look at those in greater detail. You can see here I can turn on the line weight, so my lines will get a little bit thicker if the lines have line weights to them. And then you got your coordinates. So as I move my cursor around, I can see what my coordinates are in the XY plane. So this point right here would be a X value of 11, 89, 75, 78 with a Y value of 68, 140, 18. And that's basically, you're looking at this as an easting northing because it's usually X, Y. And in this case, this is my easting being in the X direction and Y being the northing, or being the Y direction. Then over on the right, like I said, you've got your panels, so you can look at the object's properties. So if I select an object, you can see that it's up here. It says line one. That one line's been selected. If you select another object, a different object, you'll see now it says line two. So there's two lines selected. And if you hit the escape key, it will deselect those objects. So if I pick on that object under properties, it says no object selected. You can click on and drop that down. And you want to change your cursor. So see how the cursor is a square? Then that allows me to select. If I hit escape, you'll see it turns into an arrow. And that's not really going to select anything unless you come back up to this get entities properties and it turns into a selection mode. If you look at the layers, you can filter the layers. So if I type in C, it only shows any layer that starts with a C because I filtered it out. If I get rid of that and I put in topo, you'll see nothing is displayed because it doesn't match that filter. If I look at, let's scroll down a little bit and do the looks like let's try site. So if I do C-N-site, so coming back up here, I go C-N-site, it's only showing the layers that match that prefix or that filter. So it's turning off everything else except those that are there. Once you have a layer, let's say this building line, you can turn it on or off. So you can see that that building objects, every object on that layer, I can turn that on or off, or I can freeze it or thaw it. So there's a little bit of difference in CAD terms between an on and off and a freeze and a thaw. They pretty much act, have the same results. It's going to turn it on or it's going to turn it off. With it frozen, it in a CAD environment, it's not processing that data, so it kind of speeds things up. But um, you'll see that we can toggle objects on and off. You can also look at it, just shows the color of the layer. So any objects on that layer, it's showing those colors. Now that's just really just in the viewing portion of it. To switch over to editing, you click on the edit button in the upper right hand corner, and now you'll see you got a different set of tools. We've got, in addition to the panning and zooming, we've got a line, an arc, a circle, a polyline, hatch pattern, rectangle. Within the rectangle, we can create that rectangle with different methods. There's dimensions and as well as annotations. We can place fields, tables, text, you name it. This option here under modify gives us a palette of modification tools. So we can copy, move, zoom, rotate, so on and so forth. Then we can save it and even download it to download it as a DWG or DXF and even print it. So again, we have some additional tools. You'll notice the cursor acts a little different. Now when I right click, I get certain commands so I can cut, copy, paste, pan, zoom, repeat, and you also have a command line down here. So you can type in the word line and it will start drawing a line, and you can see that there's a bunch of other commands that are in here. So if you're familiar with AutoCAD and have some history or background training on AutoCAD, a lot of the same functionality you'll be found in here. So if I was to type PL for polyline, you can see them be able to draw a polyline. If I type in CI for circle, it starts and it's going to create the circle. So these little shortcut commands allow you to use the command line to draw. So if you're familiar with AutoCAD, like I said, or other CAD program, maybe BriskCAD or IntelliCAD, you're going to see very similar functionality. So that's the editing mode. So that really provides you with a quick overview. In the following videos, we're going to break it down and show you really in detail, like the view commands and the different line commands and the editing commands. Basically, we're assuming that you're new to CAD and this is your first introduction to a CAD program, possibly. And we'll go through and show you in detail some of these features and functions.